Gresini wanted to leave Ducati. That part is real. The conversations happened, the alternatives were explored, the exit was being planned, and then they stayed. So why does a team that was ready to walk end up exactly where it started? And what does it say about a manufacturer when a team has to consider leaving before it can commit to staying? This matters because of what the process revealed. Gresini didn't drift toward the door and then drift back. They opened real conversations with other manufacturers, Honda, in serious and structured discussions. And they did it because the relationship with Ducati had reached a point where a genuine exit was being evaluated. That is not a team testing leverage. That is a team running the numbers on a different future. And the fact that they came back to Ducati tells you something important. But it does not tell you that everything is fine. It tells you that the alternatives weren't good enough. And those are two very different conclusions. This is why the framing matters. So which version did Ducati's structure actually produce here? A resolution or a warning? I don't think the answer is the comfortable one. Let's have a look at what actually drove the process, because the headline outcome hides more than it reveals. We know for a fact that the trigger was not performance. Gresini delivered results. Alex Marquez finished runner-up in the World Championship. The team was competitive, professional, and producing exactly the kind of results that should have earned them security inside the structure. But that is not what happened. Ducati moved Fermín Aldeguer to VR46, a decision made without Gresini's alignment, over their heads, and without any offer to compensate what they were losing. And Nadia Padovani said it clearly. I was upset. That is not diplomatic language. That is a team principle telling you directly that the trust was broken. And I don't think you can separate that statement from everything that followed. Because once trust breaks at that level, the conversation about alternatives stops being hypothetical. How do you rebuild a working relationship between a manufacturer and a team after the team principal has said publicly, in those exact words, that they were upset by how decisions were made? I don't think the answer is easy, and I don't think Ducati has given one. But the story doesn't end there. Because Ducati's own response confirmed how serious the situation was. Davide Tardozzi said, "We don't want to lose them. They're a great team." And I'd say that sentence tells you more than the public position Ducati maintained throughout. You don't say, "We don't want to lose them," from a position of control. You say it from a position of risk. That statement is a public acknowledgement that losing Gresini was a real possibility Ducati was actively trying to avoid. Let's be honest about what that means. A manufacturer with the most dominant structure in MotoGP had to publicly appeal for a satellite team to stay. Can you ignore what that says about who actually held the leverage in this negotiation? I don't think Ducati can. We've seen satellite relationships reach breaking points before, but this one is different, and the difference matters. Let's not forget that Gresini isn't a generic satellite filling out the grid. They are one of the most experienced team operations in the paddock. They delivered a World Championship runner-up last season, and they have the infrastructure and the track record to be attractive to any manufacturer in the field. Honda's interest wasn't charity. It was a calculated assessment that Gresini is worth having. And more importantly, the fact that Gresini reached the stage of structured, time-sensitive discussions with a rival manufacturer means they were genuinely prepared to leave. This wasn't a negotiating tactic that was always going to resolve itself. This was a real decision point, and the only thing that closed it was the performance gap. But the reason Gresini ultimately came back to Ducati is the least flattering version of the outcome for everyone involved. Not because the relationship was repaired, not because Ducati addressed the underlying issues that created the tension, but because no alternative currently matches what Ducati offers on the performance side. The Ducati is the fastest and most consistent package on the grid, and I don't think a team with competitive ambitions, a team that just produced a World Championship runner-up, walks away from that advantage unless the alternative genuinely compensates for what they're giving up. It didn't, so Gresini stayed. But staying based on the absence of a better option is a fundamentally different thing from staying based on a relationship you believe in. What does Ducati actually have right now? A committed partner, or a team that concluded it had nowhere better to go? And, oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, The conditions that created this entire situation haven't changed. The structural reality that allowed Ducati to move Aldeguer over Gresini's head, without their input, without compensation, that is still the operating model. The same framework that broke Padovani's trust is still the one the partnership runs on. Gresini staying doesn't mean the problem was solved. It means the problem was tolerated because the alternative was worse. So the decision that looks like stability is actually something much more fragile, a truce built on dependency, not trust. Can you call a problem solved when the only thing that changed is that staying became more tolerable than leaving? I don't think you can, but inside Ducati's structure, they will almost certainly be treated as if they are. The decision gets filed as a renewal, the narrative becomes stability, and the conditions that created the crisis remain exactly as they were. Nothing in the agreement changes that. There are two possible scenarios from here, and I think the more uncomfortable one is significantly more likely. The first is that this episode becomes the reset. Ducati and Gresini use the experience to build a more explicit understanding of how decisions affecting the team get made. The relationship stabilizes, and the competitive results continue. I can see a version of that. Both sides have an interest in making it work. Ducati needs Gresini's track record. Gresini needs Ducati's bike. And that mutual dependency is real. I don't think this situation automatically deteriorates, but I highly doubt it resolves without the underlying tension resurfacing the next time a decision gets made over Gresini's head. And in this structure, that is a matter of when, not if. On the other hand, nothing changes structurally, and the next trigger arrives before the relationship has recovered from this one. A rider market decision, a contract detail, another allocation that prioritizes VR46. Any of these creates the same dynamic again, and the next time, the alternatives might look different. The 850 cubic centimeters era brings new manufacturers into serious conversations and new leverage for teams with the infrastructure to run at the front. Gresini has that infrastructure, and a team that already knows what it feels like to explore a different future will find it easier to explore one again. At the end of the day, the most important change in this episode isn't the outcome, it's the knowledge. Gresini now knows it can have that conversation, but it knows where the limits are, and it knows that when the moment comes again, the door is already open. Gresini didn't choose Ducati, they had no better option, and that is a very fragile foundation for a satellite relationship that Ducati is counting on to anchor their structure going forward. The outcome looks stable, the foundation it sits on is not. Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video appearing on your screen right now.